But I never went along with what everybody else was doing, and I suppose this makes you a little bit hippie or wild or mad or something, or eccentric, I guess. And I wouldn't allow motion picture magazines in my house.
In the glittering yet ruthless world of early Hollywood, few stories capture ambition, power, and betrayal more vividly than the tragic entanglement between Gloria Swanson and Joseph P. Kennedy, a relationship that began with promise and ended in financial devastation and emotional ruin, unfolding during an era when fame was fragile and fortunes could collapse overnight. Swanson, already one of the most celebrated actresses of the silent era, embodied elegance, wealth, and independence. She was a symbol of high society glamour, commanding enormous salaries and living a lifestyle that dazzled the public. Yet beneath the diamonds and headlines was a determined woman seeking artistic freedom and control over her career, a desire that made her vulnerable to the calculated charm of Kennedy. A shrewd financier who saw Hollywood not as an art form but as a marketplace, ripe for exploitation. Kennedy entered Swanson's life presenting himself as a supportive partner, promising to manage her finances, elevate her productions, and liberate her from restrictive studio contracts. But what appeared to be mentorship soon evolved into control, as he reorganized her business affairs, replaced trusted advisors, and positioned himself as a gatekeeper of her career decisions, gradually tightening his influence while Swanson, believing she had found a powerful ally, trusted him completely. Their collaboration culminated in the ambitious film Queen Kelly, directed by the notoriously extravagant Erich von Stroheim, a production that spiraled into chaos as budgets ballooned and creative disputes intensified. Yet Kennedy allowed the project to continue, knowing the financial burden rested largely on Swanson's shoulders, and when the production collapsed, it left her exposed to staggering losses, a blow compounded by the looming economic disaster that would soon sweep across America. As the stock market crash of 1929 shook industries and erased fortunes, Kennedy withdrew, distancing himself from the failing venture while Swanson was left to face mounting debts, the glamorous partnership dissolving into silence as she discovered that gifts, travel expenses, and even luxurious symbols of their relationship had been financed with her own money, a revelation that transformed admiration into betrayal and forced her to confront the harsh realities of business manipulation. The emotional impact was profound, but Swanson chose resilience over revenge, declining legal action and instead committing herself to rebuilding her life, selling possessions, downsizing her lifestyle, and pursuing new opportunities in radio and fashion. Yet the transition from silent films to talkies further complicated her comeback as Hollywood shifted rapidly, leaving many silent-era stars behind and reducing Swanson's once dominant presence to near obscurity. Meanwhile, Kennedy's influence continued to grow, his career moving into politics and wealth accumulation, creating a stark contrast between his ascent and Swanson's struggle, a divergence that highlighted the imbalance of power that defined their relationship. Years passed before Swanson experienced a dramatic resurgence, when director Billy Wilder cast her in the iconic film Sunset Boulevard, where she portrayed Norma Desmond, a faded silent film star clinging to past glory, a role that mirrored her own experiences so closely that audiences and critics were captivated by the authenticity she brought to the screen, transforming personal pain into artistic triumph and restoring her status as a legend. The story of Gloria Swanson and Joseph P. Kennedy remains one of Hollywood's most compelling cautionary tales, illustrating how ambition, trust, and power can collide in devastating ways, and how resilience can transform loss into legacy, reminding us that behind the glamour of early cinema were real struggles, real betrayals, and individuals who fought to reclaim their identities in an industry that often consumed its brightest stars, leaving Swanson not as a victim of destruction, but as a symbol of endurance whose comeback proved that even after financial ruin and emotional betrayal, true icons can rise again and redefine their place in history. The rise and fall of Gloria Swanson is not just a Hollywood story. It is a chilling portrait of power quietly reshaping destiny behind closed doors. At the height of her fame, Swanson represented the ultimate silent-era royalty, wealthy, admired, and fiercely independent. She moved through elite social circles, wore couture before it became mainstream, and commanded creative control few actresses dared to demand. Yet that independence made her both powerful and dangerously exposed. When Joseph P. Kennedy entered her world, he did so with calculated precision, presenting himself as a visionary who could elevate her beyond studio control. To Swanson, he seemed like a partner who understood ambition. To Kennedy, she was an opportunity, an investment wrapped in glamour. Their relationship quickly blurred the line between romance and business. Kennedy reorganized Swanson's finances, advised her on production choices, and slowly removed longtime advisors who might question his authority. This shift happened subtly, almost invisibly, as he positioned himself at the center of every decision. Swanson, focused on artistic freedom, embraced a collaboration. The result was a bold gamble. The production of Queen Kelly, a lavish and controversial project directed by Erich von Stroheim. The film's ambition mirrored Swanson's desire for independence, but its escalating costs signaled danger. Kennedy allowed the spending to continue, while maintaining distance from financial liability, ensuring that if disaster struck, Swanson would bear the burden. Disaster came swiftly. Production delays, creative conflicts, and runaway budgets crippled the film. As losses mounted, Kennedy began stepping back. Then, as the economic shock of 1929 rippled across industries, he withdrew almost completely. Swanson was left confronting debts that threatened her fortune and reputation. The glamour that once surrounded her dissolved into uncertainty. Even more devastating was a realization that many of the luxuries she believed Kennedy had provided, including lavish gifts, had been funded with her own money. The betrayal was not only financial, it shattered her trust and exposed the ruthless mechanics of power operating behind Hollywood's glittering facade. Yet Swanson refused to collapse. She sold jewelry, reduced expenses, and searched for new opportunities in a rapidly changing entertainment landscape. The transition from silent films to sound cinema left many stars struggling, and Swanson faced that challenge head-on. She appeared in radio, explored fashion ventures, and fought to maintain relevance while the industry moved forward. Meanwhile, Kennedy's influence grew in business and politics, highlighting the stark contrast between his ascent and her struggle. This imbalance reinforced the narrative of a powerful figure who moved on unscathed, while the artist rebuilt from the ruins years later. Fate offered Swanson a remarkable chance at redemption. Director Billy Wilder cast her in Sunset Boulevard, where she portrayed a faded silent film star haunted by past glory. The role echoed her own experiences so closely that audiences felt the authenticity in every scene. Her performance became legendary, transforming personal hardship into artistic triumph. In that moment, Swanson reclaimed her narrative, not as a victim destroyed by manipulation, but as a resilient icon who endured betrayal and emerged stronger. The story of Gloria Swanson and Joseph P. Kennedy remains one of Hollywood's most haunting cautionary tales. It reveals how ambition and trust can be weaponized, how glamour can conceal vulnerability, and how power often operates quietly behind success. But it also demonstrates the enduring strength of resilience. Swanson's comeback ensured that her legacy would not be defined by loss, but by her ability to rise again, proving that even in an industry built on illusion, authenticity and perseverance can outlast betrayal. As Hollywood entered the turbulent transition from silent films to talking pictures, Gloria Swanson found herself navigating a landscape that no longer guaranteed security for its former queens. Her association with Joseph P. Kennedy had already shaken her financial foundation, but the industry itself was shifting beneath her feet. Studios began prioritizing new voices, new faces, and different storytelling styles. The elegance and expressive physicality that once defined Swanson's performances was suddenly considered part of a fading era. For an actress who had once commanded the highest salaries in Hollywood, the silence that followed was deafening. The world that had once celebrated her now seemed to move forward without looking back, leaving her to rebuild not only her finances but her identity. Swanson's resilience became her greatest weapon. Instead of retreating from public life, she experimented with radio appearances, stage work, and entrepreneurial ventures. She explored fashion design, launching clothing lines that reflected her sophisticated style, proving that her creativity extended beyond cinema. These efforts were not just business decisions, they were acts of survival. Every project represented a step toward independence after the collapse of her partnership with Kennedy. Meanwhile, his career continued to expand, reinforcing the painful contrast between his upward trajectory and her struggle to regain footing. This imbalance added emotional weight to her journey, highlighting how power could reshape lives in dramatically different ways. Despite setbacks, Swanson maintained a quiet determination to return to film. She understood that the public still remembered her, even if the industry had shifted. That opportunity finally arrived when Billy Wilder envisioned her for the haunting role in Sunset Boulevard. The film told the story of Norma Desmond, a forgotten silent film star clinging to past glory, and Swanson infused the character with emotional depth drawn from her own experiences. Audiences were captivated. Critics praised her performance, and she once again stood in the spotlight, not as a carefree socialite of the 1920s, but as a survivor who transformed hardship into artistry. The irony of her comeback was striking. The very experiences that had threatened to destroy her became the foundation of her greatest performance. Her portrayal resonated because it felt authentic, reflecting the vulnerability and strength she had developed over years of adversity. In reclaiming her place in Hollywood, Swanson demonstrated that true icons are defined not by uninterrupted success but by their ability to endure and evolve. Her story became a testament to resilience, illustrating that even after betrayal and financial collapse, determination can rewrite destiny. Ultimately, the saga of Gloria Swanson and Joseph P. Kennedy stands as a powerful reminder of Hollywood's dual nature, glamour intertwined with risk, opportunity shadowed by manipulation. Swanson's journey from high society mistress to struggling artist and finally to triumphant legend reveals a narrative far richer than scandal alone. It is a story of survival, reinvention, and the enduring power of talent. Long after the headlines faded, Swanson's legacy endured, proving that while power may shift and fortunes may fall, resilience is a final word. The aftermath of the collapse left Gloria Swanson facing not only financial ruin, but a profound shift in how she viewed trust and power. The glittering parties and elite social circles that once surrounded her suddenly felt hollow. She had experienced firsthand how influence could operate quietly, how promises of partnership could conceal calculated ambition. Meanwhile, Joseph P. Kennedy moved forward, his reputation largely untouched by the turmoil that had reshaped Swanson's life. This imbalance became one of the most haunting aspects of the story. While one figure rebuilt from the ground up, the other continued ascending, illustrating the stark divide between artistic vulnerability and financial authority. Determined not to be defined by loss, Swanson embraced reinvention. She adapted to new mediums, explored entrepreneurship, and remained visible despite industry changes. Her persistence demonstrated a quiet strength that contrasted sharply with the dramatic fall she had endured. Each step forward, whether in radio, fashion, or public appearances, was a declaration that she would not disappear. These efforts gradually reshaped her image from fallen socialite to resilient survivor, proving that resilience could outshine scandal. When the opportunity to return to cinema finally arrived through Billy Wilder and the haunting narrative of Sunset Boulevard, Swanson transformed her personal history into unforgettable performance. The character she portrayed mirrored her own experiences so closely that audiences sensed authenticity in every expression. It was not merely a comeback, it was a reclamation of identity. The industry that once seemed to move on without her now celebrated her again, recognizing the depth she brought to the screen. In the end, the story of Gloria Swanson stands as more than a tale of betrayal. It is a portrait of endurance in an industry defined by shifting fortunes. Her journey from high society glamour to financial struggle and back to legendary status reveals how resilience can redefine legacy. While Joseph P. Kennedy's influence shaped a moment in her life, it did not determine her destiny. Swanson's comeback ensured that she would be remembered not as someone destroyed, but as someone who survived, adapted, and ultimately triumphed over the shadows of power. The deeper one looks into the life of Gloria Swanson, the clearer it becomes that her downfall was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual unraveling shaped by ambition, trust, and the quiet maneuvering of power. At her peak, Swanson represented everything Hollywood aspired to be: wealth, elegance, artistic independence, and social prestige. She moved effortlessly among aristocrats and industrialists, attended lavish gatherings, and lived in a world where influence seemed limitless. Yet that very world created the illusion of security, making it difficult to recognize the shifting ground beneath her feet. When Joseph P. Kennedy stepped into her life, he appeared as a stabilizing force, someone who understood both business and opportunity. His confidence, strategic thinking, and promises of creative freedom seemed perfectly aligned with Swanson's desire to break free from studio control. But behind that confidence was a calculated approach that prioritized financial gain over artistic partnership. That as their relationship deepened, Kennedy began reshaping Swanson's professional structure. He encouraged her to pursue independent productions, which sounded empowering, yet these ventures required significant financial risk. Advisors who had guided her for years were gradually replaced, and Kennedy's influence expanded until he effectively controlled major decisions. Swanson, driven by her ambition to create meaningful films, embraced a new direction. The production of Queen Kelly became the ultimate test of this partnership. Directed by Erich von Stroheim, the project quickly spiraled into an expensive and controversial endeavor. Sets grew more elaborate, scenes became more ambitious, and costs escalated beyond expectation. Kennedy, while overseeing the business side, ensured that the financial liability rested heavily on Swanson. When disagreements intensified and production stalled, the film's future became uncertain, and the once promising collaboration began to fracture. The timing could not have been worse. As economic instability gripped the nation, the looming crash of 1929 threatened industries across the board. Kennedy, sensing danger, began distancing himself from the failing project. Swanson, however, remained committed, determined to salvage the film and protect her reputation. When production collapsed, she faced staggering losses. The glamorous world she had built suddenly felt fragile. Adding to the devastation was the realization that many of the luxuries she believed Kennedy had provided, expensive gifts, travel, and lavish gestures, had been financed through her own accounts. The emotional betrayal cut deeper than the financial damage. It revealed how trust had been manipulated, leaving her to rebuild alone while Kennedy moved forward with his ambitions. The years that followed tested Swanson's resilience. She sold possessions, downsized her lifestyle, and explored new opportunities in radio and fashion. The transition to sound films created additional challenges, as Hollywood evolved rapidly and many silent-era stars struggled to adapt. Swanson refused to disappear. However, she remained determined to maintain her presence, appearing in stage productions and entrepreneurial ventures. Her persistence demonstrated a refusal to accept defeat, even as public attention shifted elsewhere. Meanwhile, Kennedy's career advanced, emphasizing the contrast between their paths. This divergence reinforced a narrative of power and vulnerability, highlighting how one individual could rise while another fought to recover. Eventually, Swanson's story took a dramatic turn when Billy Wilder cast her in Sunset Boulevard. The role of Norma Desmond, a faded silent film star clinging to past glory, echoed Swanson's own experiences. She infused the character with authenticity, drawing from her personal struggles and triumphs. The performance captivated audiences and critics alike, restoring her status as a cinematic legend. It was more than a comeback. It was a redefinition of her legacy. The hardship she endured became the foundation of her greatest artistic achievement, transforming personal pain into enduring art. In the end, the story of Gloria Swanson is not solely about betrayal or financial ruin. It is about survival in an industry defined by illusion and ambition. While Joseph P. Kennedy's influence shaped a chapter of her life, it did not define her destiny. Swanson's determination, adaptability, and talent ensured that she would be remembered not as a figure destroyed by manipulation, but as a resilient icon who overcame adversity. Her journey stands as a powerful reminder that behind Hollywood's glamour lies a world of risk, and that true legends are those who endure, rebuild, and ultimately rise above the shadows. Long before scandal reshaped her destiny, Gloria Swanson stood at the center of Hollywood's most elite circles, admired not only for her acting but for her command over style, business instincts, and social influence. She was more than a movie star. She was a cultural force. Producers courted her, designers built trends around her, and audiences followed her every move. Her independence was rare in an era when studios controlled nearly every aspect of an actor's life. Swanson negotiated contracts, selected projects, and pursued creative risks that set her apart. Yet success created its own vulnerability. Surrounded by wealth and influence, she became accustomed to grand gestures and bold promises. When Joseph P. Kennedy appeared with his calm confidence and financial expertise, he seemed like the perfect partner to expand her ambitions. He spoke the language of control and ownership, promising to free her from studio interference and elevate her career into something lasting. For Swanson, it sounded like the next evolution of her independence. For Kennedy, it was an opportunity to align himself with one of Hollywood's most valuable names. Their partnership unfolded gradually, blending personal and professional boundaries until they were nearly indistinguishable. Kennedy reviewed her accounts, suggested investments, and encouraged independent productions. Each move appeared strategic, even empowering. But as his involvement deepened, the balance shifted. Advisors who once guided Swanson were replaced, and decisions increasingly flowed through Kennedy's judgment. Swanson, trusting his expertise, focused on artistic expression. This dynamic reached its peak during the production of Queen Kelly, directed by Erich von Stroheim. The film promised to redefine her career: lavish sets, bold storytelling, and a departure from formulaic studio projects. Yet the ambition came at a cost. Expenses grew uncontrollably, schedules slipped, and creative disagreements intensified. Kennedy, overseeing finances, allowed the spending to continue while ensuring that the financial exposure remained largely Swanson's responsibility. The project that was meant to secure her independence instead became a ticking clock counting down to crisis that as production faltered, the broader economic climate worsened. The late 1920s were marked by uncertainty, and when financial market began to tremble, Kennedy sensed the danger. He started to distance himself from the troubled film. Swanson, however, remained committed, believing that perseverance could salvage both the project and her reputation. When the production ultimately collapsed, the losses were staggering. The glamorous image she had built was suddenly overshadowed by debt. Even more devastating was a discovery that many of the luxuries she associated with Kennedy, expensive gifts, travel, and lavish displays, had been financed using her own money. The betrayal struck deeply, transforming admiration into disillusionment. While Kennedy moved forward with his ambitions, Swanson faced a daunting task of rebuilding her life from the ground up. The years that followed demanded extraordinary resilience. Swanson sold valuable possessions, restructured her finances, and sought new avenues for expression. She ventured into radio, explored fashion design, and appeared on stage, determined to remain relevant. The transition to sound films created additional challenges, as Hollywood priorities shifted and silent-era icons struggled to adapt. Swanson refused to disappear. Each effort represented not only survival but defiance. Her persistence slowly reshaped public perception, turning her from a fallen socialite into a figure of determination. Meanwhile, Kennedy's influence expanded into politics and business, highlighting the stark contrast between their paths. The imbalance underscored the harsh realities of power, how one figure could rise while another fought to recover from shared history years later. Swanson's opportunity for redemption arrived when Billy Wilder cast her in Sunset Boulevard. The role of Norma Desmond, a forgotten silent film star, mirrored her own journey. Swanson infused the character with emotional authenticity, drawing from personal hardship. Audiences were captivated, critics applauded, and Swanson reclaimed her place in cinematic history. The comeback was not merely professional, it was symbolic. She transformed adversity into art, proving that resilience could redefine legacy. Ultimately, the saga of Gloria Swanson and Joseph P. Kennedy is a powerful reflection of Hollywood's dual nature, glamour intertwined with risk, ambition shadowed by manipulation. Swanson's journey from high society icon to financial struggle and eventual triumph reveals a narrative shaped by endurance. While Kennedy's influence marked a chapter of her life, it did not determine her fate. Swanson's determination ensured that she would be remembered not as someone destroyed, but as someone who rose above betrayal and reclaimed her identity, leaving behind a legacy stronger than scandal and more enduring than power. By the mid-1930s, the emotional toll on Gloria Swanson had grown heavier than the financial losses themselves. Hollywood had changed, and the woman who once defined elegance now found herself confronting a world that seemed to have forgotten her influence. Invitations became fewer, roles disappeared, and the social circles that once celebrated her began to shift toward newer stars. Yet beneath the quiet decline, Swanson remained determined. She refused to allow her story to end as a cautionary tale shaped by Joseph P. Kennedy's calculated maneuvering. Instead, she focused on rebuilding her identity, step by step. Even when each opportunity seemed small compared to her former glory, she experimented with radio, understanding that the new medium offered a different kind of intimacy with audiences. Her voice, once secondary to expressive silent performances, became a tool for connection. She also pursued fashion ventures, designing clothing that reflected her sophisticated sensibilities. These projects were not merely financial necessities. They were expressions of creativity that allowed her to remain relevant. While Kennedy's career expanded into broader spheres of influence, Swanson's resilience quietly reshaped her narrative. The contrast between their paths highlighted the stark realities of ambition, one figure ascending through calculated strategy, the other rebuilding through perseverance. Despite the challenges, Swanson never abandoned her love for cinema. She continued seeking opportunities, believing that the screen still held a place for her. That belief paid off when Billy Wilder envisioned her for the haunting role in Sunset Boulevard. The character of Norma Desmond, a forgotten silent film icon, echoed Swanson's own experiences with uncanny precision. Drawing from personal hardship, she delivered a performance filled with vulnerability and intensity. Audiences recognized the authenticity immediately, and critics praised her return. In that moment, Swanson transformed years of struggle into artistic triumph, reclaiming her place in Hollywood history. Her comeback carried a deeper meaning. It demonstrated that while betrayal and financial collapse can reshape a life, they do not define it. Swanson's journey illustrated the enduring power of resilience. The woman once described as a high society socialite emerged as a symbol of endurance, proving that talent and determination could outlast manipulation. Meanwhile, the shadow of Joseph P. Kennedy's influence faded into the background of her legacy. History ultimately remembered Swanson not for her downfall, but for her remarkable ability to rise again. The story of Gloria Swanson remains one of Hollywood's most compelling narratives, a tale of glamour, betrayal, survival, and redemption. It reminds us that behind the dazzling lights of early cinema were individuals navigating ambition and vulnerability. Swanson's legacy endures because she refused to surrender to circumstance. She rebuilt, reinvented, and ultimately redefined her place in history, ensuring that her name will be associated not with destruction, but with the strength to overcome it.